A quiet town in Pennsylvania. West Pittston. This is the kind of place where people come seeking a peaceful life, where neighbors know each other and doors are left unlocked. But beneath this idyllic facade, something incredibly dark was waiting. For one family, this ordinary American town was about to become the epicenter of their absolute worst nightmare. This is no ordinary ghost story passed down around a campfire. This is one of the most terrifying, extensively documented, and thoroughly investigated true hauntings in American history. Welcome to the chilling, terrifying reality of the Smurl family. The year was 1974. Jack and Janet Smurl were an ordinary, hard-working, deeply religious couple. They had just poured their life savings into buying a beautiful, albeit aging, duplex home in this quiet neighborhood on Chase Street. They moved in with Jack's parents, John and Mary, who lived in the other half of the duplex, along with Jack and Janet's 4 young daughters. At first, everything seemed absolutely perfect. The family was busy painting walls, repairing old rooms, and unpacking boxes. They believed this house would be their beautiful new beginning, their slice of the American dream. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that the house they were so lovingly turning into a home was already occupied. It was occupied by something ancient, something that had never been human. And it was absolutely furious about their arrival. The very foundation of the home seemed to resent their happiness. The problems started with small, everyday nuisances that could easily be explained away. Brand new pipes would suddenly start leaking uncontrollably, flooding the basement without warning. Freshly laid tiles in the bathroom would inexplicably peel off the walls and crash to the floor in the middle of the night. Jack, being a pragmatic man, simply brushed it off, thinking these were just the common, expensive woes of an aging house settling. But this was merely the subtle prelude to a horrifying symphony. Soon, the strange occurrences became impossible to ignore. Tools would vanish from Jack's workbench, only to reappear weeks later in completely different rooms. Doors would slam shut with violent force when there was no breeze, and the heavy, undeniable sound of heavy footsteps could be heard pacing the upstairs hallways when everyone was downstairs. A few weeks later, Janet began sensing something fundamentally wrong, specifically in the kitchen. When she was entirely alone, washing dishes or preparing meals, an overwhelming feeling of being watched would suddenly paralyze her. The hairs on the back of her neck would stand up. A repulsive stench would abruptly fill the air, smelling exactly like rotting flesh or stale sweat. Yet, no matter how hard they searched, the source remained completely impossible to find. Then, the electrical appliances developed a sinister mind of their own. The television in the living room would violently burst to life at exactly 2 a.m., the volume turned all the way up to deafening levels, broadcasting nothing but blinding white static. The overhead lights flickered rapidly like a strobe, and the room temperature would plummet to freezing within seconds, so cold you could see your breath in the middle of summer. The Smurl family was terrified, but they were trapped. They had put all their money into this house, they couldn't just leave. They began hiding their experiences from one another, desperately hoping they were just losing their minds or suffering from collective exhaustion. But very soon, this supposed delusion was going to violently manifest into a physical reality. The activity rapidly escalated from mischievous poltergeist tricks to direct, violent physical assaults. One night, while Janet was sleeping, she woke up completely paralyzed, unable to move a muscle. She felt an imposing, heavy presence pressing down on the mattress next to her. She forced her eyes open to find a deep, black shadow. A mass devoid of any facial features, hovering inches from her face. Before she could even scream, an unseen, immense force threw her violently off the mattress and onto the hardwood floor. The family dog, Simon, typically a gentle and calm German shepherd, now spent hours aggressively barking at empty corners and solid walls, his hackles raised in pure terror. On several occasions, the family watched in horror as an invisible entity physically picked the heavy dog up and threw him violently down the wooden staircase. Animals are always the first to sense pure evil, and the Smurl family dog was petrified, eventually refusing to enter certain rooms altogether. Jack, who had tried so hard to remain skeptical, could no longer deny the demonic presence. While he slept, deep, burning scratch marks would mysteriously appear across his back and chest, 3 parallel lines, the classic mocking of the Holy Trinity. Sickening sounds of fingernails scratching against the drywall echoed through the dark house all night long. This was not a restless human spirit. This was a powerful, inhuman entity, a demon. The Smurls were deeply devout Catholics, and their faith was their only weapon. They desperately turned to prayer. Janet would walk through the dark halls, crying as she sprinkled holy water and aggressively recited scriptures from the Bible. But instead of cleansing the home, this spiritual warfare only enraged the entity further. It saw their faith not as a threat, but as a challenge. The moment the holy water hit the walls, the house would explode into chaos. Heavy porcelain dishes, sharp kitchen knives, and framed family photos would levitate and launch themselves violently toward Janet's head like projectiles. Drawers would shoot out of cabinets. It was as if the demon was openly mocking their god. The atmosphere in the house became so suffocatingly dark and oppressive that the young girls refused to sleep in their own beds, huddling together on the living room floor. The apparitions became more frequent and more horrifying. Jack's parents, living in the adjoining duplex, began hearing vile, disembodied voices screaming profanities through the walls. Jack reported seeing a grotesque, pig-like creature walking on 2 legs in the hallway. Janet saw a dark, hooded figure that would glide right through solid walls. The entity was manifesting physically, drawing energy from their constant fear. With all conventional options exhausted, and local priests too terrified to help, in 1986, the desperate family called upon the world-renowned paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were the undisputed legends of the paranormal field, the same team who had investigated the infamous Amityville horror and the Perron family case that would later inspire The Conjuring. The second Lorraine Warren stepped through the front door of the Smurl residence, an unnatural, freezing dread washed over her. As a highly sensitive, gifted clairvoyant, she didn't need scientific equipment to know the terrifying truth. She immediately felt a suffocating pressure on her chest. She identified that the house held not just one ghost, but 3 distinct human spirits, who were being held captive and controlled by one overwhelmingly powerful, ancient demon. Ed Warren, determined to document the evil, set up his equipment. He began playing religious music and reciting holy provocations to draw the entity out into the open. The response was immediate and terrifying. The temperature in the room dropped below 0 instantly. Deafening, rhythmic knocking, again in groups of 3, erupted from inside the walls, shaking the entire foundation. Suddenly, mirrors shattered into 1,000 pieces without anyone touching them. The Warrens concluded that this parasitic demon was systematically feeding off the Smurl family's life force. It was using a psychological warfare tactic, sleep deprivation, physical assault, and constant fear, to break them down mentally, emotionally, and physically. Its ultimate goal was not just to haunt them, but to eventually possess them entirely. The Warrens knew they were dealing with a heavy, malevolent force. Despite their attempts to keep it quiet, word of the demonic infestation quickly leaked to the local press. Almost overnight, the quiet street in West Pittston was swarmed by media vans, satellite trucks, and hundreds of curious onlookers. The Smurl residence became the most publicized haunted house in America. Skeptics, journalists, and psychologists called it a blatant publicity stunt or a shared mass hysteria. But those who dared to investigate closely changed their tune. Reporters who were invited inside the house to debunk the claims ran out shaking in pure terror, reporting freezing cold spots, phantom touches, and hearing disembodied growls. Even the skeptics couldn't explain the putrid smells or the physical scratches that appeared on Jack's body in broad daylight while cameras were rolling. The situation became so public and so undeniably life-threatening that the Catholic Church, specifically the Diocese of Scranton, was finally forced to intervene. After a thorough investigation, they authorized an official clearing of the home. 3 separate, intensive exorcisms were performed inside the Smurl residence by sanctioned priests. But the demon was ancient, entrenched, and terrifyingly strong. It actively, violently fought back during the sacred rituals. The walls of the house violently shook as if hit by an earthquake. Heavy oak furniture levitated in front of the priest's eyes. The entity spat vile curses in Latin, a language the Smurls didn't speak. Despite the prayers, the holy water, and the rites of exorcism, the entity refused to be banished. It claimed the house as its own. The toll on the family was devastating. Jack had lost his job due to the constant stress and lack of sleep. Janet was suffering from severe depression and anxiety. The children were traumatized, their childhoods completely stolen by the unseen terror. The family was falling apart, completely isolated because friends and relatives were too terrified to ever visit them. After enduring 15 agonizing years in the absolute shadow of pure evil, the Smurl family was completely broken. By 1989, they realized that if they stayed, they would die. They surrendered the battle to win the war for their survival. To save their sanity, their lives, and the future of their daughters, they packed what little they could, left their dream home behind, and moved away, refusing to disclose their new location to the public. Today, that same duplex still stands on that quiet street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. It has changed hands several times since the Smurls fled. While some of the current owners claim they haven't experienced anything on the level of the 1980s, neighbors whisper about strange lights, and anyone who walks past the property late at night can't help but feel a suffocating sense of dread staring back at them from those dark, empty windows. Is the demon still waiting patiently inside those walls, dormant, waiting for a vulnerable soul to enter? Or did it attach itself to the Smurl family, following them to their new home, continuing its torment in secret? The church officially closed the case, but the horror remains entirely real for those who lived it. It's a terrifying mystery that perhaps no one truly wants the answer to. The Smurl family haunting remains a chilling reminder that sometimes, the true monsters aren't hiding under the bed, they are woven into the very walls of our homes. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark, terrifying side of American history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more terrifying true stories. And remember, be careful what house you call home.